Yo, man, props to the assembled media for not busting out laughing when Gene Smith was like, hey, that's two more schools that can maybe pull some weight. What you want from me? I mean, the amount of shade at Michigan, Michigan State, and everybody else in the Big Ten, soon to be Big 20 at this point, is incredible. So this is a story, man, we didn't even touch on it yesterday. The seismic shift in college football with USC and UCLA joining the Big Ten in 2024. J.A., I mean, bro, there's so much going on in the NBA I want to talk to you about, obviously. But before we get there, I figured we got a Northwestern guy, a Northwestern professor.
So should I take that personally?
Who lived in LA and also taught at USC. So it's like, this is right in your wheelhouse, like, dude.
This is all me. My mom went to UCLA, so yeah, this is all me in my wheelhouse. So yeah, I feel a little bit insulted by what Gene Smith had to say. I took it personally. You know, let me do my MJ, look at the iPad and shake my head at what I'm seeing here. Because, but I mean, it's true. It's more star power. It's really more so than the competitive balance. It's the, it's the TV markets, right? That's the main factor in here. But one thing this addresses, which I've said for a long time, was the biggest disadvantage the Big Ten had from a competitive standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint, was that it was the only one of the major power football conferences that didn't have a footprint in California, Texas, or Florida. And that's where all the best high school football recruits are. And the Big Ten was the only conference that didn't have a presence in one of those three major recruiting states. And now they do. And so, the fact that you can, Wisconsin or Ohio State or Northwestern or anybody can go to a kid in California and say, hey, you can come back to the Midwest, play for us, and guess what? You'll be playing out here. Your family will be able to drive to see you, a couple times during your career, at least. So I think that's a cool thing. I'm a little sad Northwestern can no longer say it's the only private school in the Big Ten. We lost that distinction. At some point, man, it's going to be weird if UCLA or USC plays in the Rose Bowl game on New Year's Day representing the Big Ten.
It's already weird.
So wrong.
At some point, it's already weird. Talking about it is weird.
But when that moment happens, and it will happen, and because it's going to happen, that's the end of the Rose Bowl as we know it, right? The Rose Bowl was the Midwestern Big Ten teams will come out and play the West Coast teams very frequently, UCLA or USC, the California teams in the Rose Bowl, and what the Big Ten Pac-10 matchup, Pac-12 matchup stood for, the tradition of the Rose Bowl, that's gone. So, we've seen conferences come and go. The Rose Bowl was one thing that managed to hold on to college football as we knew it for so long, to the point that they refused to corporate brand their name. It was always the Rose Bowl presented by so-and-so rather than putting the corporate sponsor in front because the tradition meant that much. The name, the brand of the Rose Bowl meant that much. And now that's gone. And I weep for that because I was a big Rose Bowl guy. Next, they're going to change the starting time. Because the other cool thing was it would start in the afternoon, and in the fourth quarter, the sun would start setting, and you get the sunset reflected on the mountains. The mountains would start to glow.
Now it's going to be a night game. They're going to make it in prime time.
It'll start at like 9 o'clock Pacific time now. Wow.
So check it. I'm going to ask both of y'all this, man. So here's a headline I saw. This from CBS, that the Big Ten is holding on further expansion, quote unquote, for now, as it waits for Notre Dame to decide what it wants to do. But I wonder for both of you guys, and I'm gonna go. I know your answer, Vinny. Before I ask the question, just based on the look on your face, is this good for college football? Good for the Big Ten, but good for college football.
I mean, what is college football now? It's an arms race. And if you're a staunch traditionalist and you're holding on to that, you're going to be literally left holding the bag. Like if you're one of those minor conferences that's not the SEC, that's not the Big Ten, and you're trying to hold on to what you think the way things used to be, you're going to wind up being like the Pac-8, which is what it's basically going, to look like right now. And my thing is, I think from a standpoint of competition, you're right. When I think of Michigan, the school that I followed, very, very closely as a child, Tom Brady came from California. They had a lot of recruiting. Some of their biggest recruits came from outside of their home state. So it's not just Ohio. Ohio recruits everywhere. Now I think I won't say it evens the playing field, because Ohio State is always going to have a leg up for various reasons that we're not going to discuss here. But I'd wonder if it does give other top-tier programs a chance to catch up, to close the gap on Ohio State compared to Ohio State lapping the field even more.
And you wonder, too, about some of the secondary things. So you talk about the preservation of tradition. I mean, one thing at least, okay, USC, UCLA, that rivalry is intact. USC, Notre Dame remains intact. They'll create some new rivalries, obviously, but you lose little things like, most people probably aren't aware, for USC fans and alumni, they call it the weekender, when you go up to play either Stanford or Cal up in the Bay Area. And it's like a nice weekend trip. You know, it's a quick, easy trip. A lot of USC, the fan base would go up to the Bay Area and spend the weekend there. And now that goes away, you know, unless they somehow keep a rivalry game with Stanford or something on the schedule. But I don't think it's that important to keep. So just a little thing like that gets lost, you know. And so even as you try to preserve some of the major things, you're just going to lose some other aspects of it. It's you know, it's just been pointing in this direction for so long. I can't even weep. As Vinny said, what is college football?
Nothing.
You know, I don't weep for the NCAA model for sure.
Right.
You know, I mean, this is another step toward, you know, the conferences are going to take autonomy and eventually break away from the NCAA, which we've seen the NCAA is trying to do whatever it can to hang on. But, you know, it hasn't had autonomy over college football for a long time.
Right.
But, you know, this is going to further take steps toward the divorce. But then the key thing is, okay, so in the name of this, if these schools are no longer member institutions of the NCAA, then do they participate in the NCAA basketball tournament, which we all love, and which is the best thing the NCAA does. And what's going to be the impact of this separation of the college football powers from the NCAA? Is it going to take UCLA out of the NCAA basketball tournament? Is that the end result? Who knows?
Right. Everybody's making these decisions based on football. Before we move to the NBA, just shout out to Lincoln Riley, who left the Big 12 school, a school that is going to the SEC, for a Pac-12 school, and now he's going to be coaching in the Big 10. Okay, just like, I mean, like Lincoln Riley, man, that's what a turn of events. All right, you know what, Vinny, you had something in your feed. I'll kind of keep with that same theme. Vinny, you had something in your feed about the NBA needs a quiet offseason. And Jay, we were talking about this, Vinny and I, before the show, just about like how much fun, I'm not going to steal Vinny's thunder, but how much fun NBA free agency is. It's like the, you know, with apologies to the NHL or apologies to golf, PGA, or live if you prefer, it might be the fourth major sport out this mug. I mean, NBA free agency is incredible. Annually, this time of year is not just, fireworks are not just reserved for the fourth. I love it. But when a guy like a Kevin Durant is jumping
when he enters
again,
the chat.
when he enters the chat with 4 years left on his contract, I'll just put it simply. I'll just make it simple. Is this really good for the NBA? Because there are a lot of people, I referenced the column I didn't like a few minutes ago, there are a lot of people that do not like this level of player agency. So, Vinny, you go ahead and explain your own take on this in this offseason and NBA free agency.
Well, Jay, here's my thought. Where everybody's trying to make the regular season matter, right? Like we're trying to do mid-season tournaments and, you know, more rest and everything else. My feeling is you need more continuity. Like the player movement stuff, free agency doesn't bother me as a whole, but I feel like there's a certain level of connective tissue that we don't have anymore. Like there's a certain level of following the story along from one franchise, climbing the ladder, growing and maturing together, making small tweaks that the casual fan can look up and say, man, I didn't see them. I haven't seen them yet this year, but oh yeah, I remember seeing this team, as opposed to, man, I haven't tuned in this year. Why is Kevin Durant on that team now? You know, why is Kyrie Irving on this team now? Like, I have no problem with those guys exercising their agency and control over their careers. Like, you know, all for that. But from a standpoint of, if July is the most exciting month of the year, to me, I feel like June and November should be the most exciting months of the year if you're the NBA, when it starts to start the story, and then June when it finishes. And I feel like July is sort of taking the thunder of those two things. So it would help to have a quieter offseason, not just to have all of the drama July 1st.
And so we could do more to celebrate the moves like you guys were talking about. The Brogdon acquisition by the Celtics used to be like, okay, these incremental steps, right? Once upon a time, the Warriors' big outside person that they brought in, yeah, they built that team through the draft, but it took another step, and they became championship contenders when they brought in Andre Iguodala, right? And obviously later they got Kevin Durant, and that changed the whole landscape of the NBA. But the notion of teams being rewarded for taking those smart incremental steps, like the acquisition of a Brogdon, like Iguodala was once upon a time for the Warriors, and we don't have that now, right? It's only the super huge headlines. And it's funny because it seemed like it was going to be a summer of the smaller steps until KD, blew everything up. We'll see if Kyrie changes that. I don't even know if Kyrie alters the landscape. I mean, what did he do for the Nets? And let's give Brad Stevens credit. He's getting a lot of kudos for some of the moves he's making. But I want to retroactively give Brad Stevens and Danny Ainge credit for emerging from their Kyrie Irving experience unscathed. As we've seen what he's done to the Nets and Deshaun Marks and Joe Tsai. Like, let's give some retroactive flowers to Ainge and Stevens, because they somehow managed to get Kyrie, not give up, not be hurt by what they gave up for him, and not be worse off for having had him, unlike the Nets.
Here's the dirty secret. Here's the dirty secret. Go ahead, Mike. No, nobody's worse for wear when they lose Kyrie Irving. That's the dirty secret.
Well, that's that too. Here's two quick things, J.A. One, just on the good for the game thing. Just like kids don't wait until Christmas Eve to make Christmas lists, they make them year-round. I think July 1st drives the interest in the NBA. NBA Twitter half the time is the games, and the other time is, yo, can you imagine this guy on this team and this guy's unhappy? I think it drives year-round interest in the league in a unique way.
And it makes November more interesting. Vinny talks about November. November becomes interesting because you want to see how
because of all the new faces and new places.
And so you go through that November and December, and then you kind of tune away from the NBA, NFL playoffs, and then March Madness, and then you come back to the NBA.
So before we go to break, real quick, where does Kevin Durant end up?
I'll say Phoenix. That's not a very creative pick. I haven't put a lot of thought of it. I don't want to put a lot of thought into it. So I'll say Phoenix. Just to be done with it, right? Just to be done with it. I really want to be done with this story.
We're never done with it.
That's the beauty of it. J.A., we appreciate you. Love you, brother. Thank you.
All right, y'all. Good seeing you. Have fun in Vegas.
Appreciate you, Jay.
Hey, thanks for watching Brother from Another on YouTube. Make sure you hit subscribe before you leave, and be sure to watch us 3 to 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Peacock. Appreciate you.